I had to babysit today, again, in a chess game. Did I ever tell you how much I hate kids? They're always so underrated, it's crazy. Well, on the contrary, I did show the kid a lesson. You know, as the good old Russian saying goes, with the yacht to the endgame. I am facing a 15-year-old kid from Germany, Rampy Jonas, 1887, but it was a nice, thing to kind of like, get some small rest from those super intense games. It was funny. I think Hammer mentioned something like Dina was hangover after her previous win over Grandmaster in the round 4. I'm playing white and I start with my usual e4. The kid goes with e5, knight f3, knight c6. Now, pause. I mean, not for you, pause for me. What should I do? I had this very bad sequence of very, very disastrous Scotch defenses where I would lose every single game since like January, and I couldn't figure out what to do. I had some sharp lines here and there for try to play for a win, but I didn't have time to repass them. So I was like, should I repeat the same thing that I had just before, or should I go for something new? Well, after something like 3 minutes of meditation, I decided to continue to do the same thing that I did before, which is d4, e takes d4, knight takes d4, bishop c5. Ooh, relief. My opponent did not go for the most boring there is this word that starts with P. I'm not gonna pronounce it because it's bad for YouTube, but this is how sometimes my friends call this line for white, obviously. So knight f6 would be the main line, and something after this, I would have very, very boring games here with, you know how it goes, Scotch defense, or it's for knight, Scotch variation. But thanks God, my opponent was the one going for a bit more edgy line, bishop c5, and I was super happy about that. I was like, okay, I'll just continue what I did before and do a slight improvement in somewhere in the meantime. Knight takes c6, queen f6 was such a great news for me. Literally. Because, I come from Soviet school of chess, or Russian school of chess, or whatever you want to call it. We have some very solid rules. And one of the rules that I learned when I was a very small kid and I was playing adults and everybody would really troll me hard and mock at me was the saying, with the yacht to the endgame. There is this very famous book by Mikhail Shereshevsky, one of the best Soviet coaches of chess, well, a legend, who wrote this sequence of books called With the Yacht to the Endgame, which basically says that when you're facing a younger opponent, it's more likely that they have less experience in the endgame. Nowadays, young generation, they study tactics, but even back in the old times, young generations had less experience in the endgames, had less time having studied that and played, so they were weaker there. So it's like as if youngsters did not understand chess deep enough. So the best way to outplay them for more experienced players would be to go to the endgame, where you cannot just calculate everything. You need to understand things. You need to have experience. You need to think with your head. And this is how I usually outplay lower opponents. And yeah, when my opponent played for this bishop c5, queen f6, and I was like, queen f3, yes, I do want to go for the endgame, and I am going to give you a lesson. Spoiler, the lesson did take place. B takes c6. Bishop e2.
Dina's going for an early queen trade. Wow. What a boomer.
Queen takes f3. Yay! Endgame. G takes f3. Knight e7. Okay, here I had some options. Knight d2, knight b3, or knight c3. Or rook g1. Rook g1 is nice because I do not yet know where I put the knight, and I kind of do the useful move with my rook, putting it on the open file, and you know by now that rooks belong to open files. Another option was bishop e3, but I wasn't convinced after bishop f3 if let's say takes, and d5. I couldn't understand what to do next because I obviously don't want to take because I don't want to double the pawns, but the thing is that computers is just knight c3, keeping the pressure in the center, and white is just better. But okay, good to know for the next time. I did this bit edgy move, eventually h4. The reason I did it is because I wanted to play next rook g1 and on knight g6 have this h5. Careful, it's not an isolated pawn, it's just a pawn that is isolated from other pawns. And I want to push it. And besides, if you saw my lesson with Andrea, you remember that side pawns, they advance like crab, like A and the H. Oh, you don't know who's Andrea? Well, you'd better check out Boda's live. h4, I did this move, bit edgy, but okay. d5. Whoa, 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 whoa. The guy is serious. I'm like, okay, rook g1. Now what are you gonna do with your pawn? You cannot play knight g6 because of h5. Sure, castle? Are you kidding me? I was like, what? Everybody knows that in the endgames, the strongest piece is the king. If the king is the strongest piece in the endgame, then why do you put it to the side? You do not castle normally in the endgames. But here, that being said, sometimes I do have this weakness when I forget that sometimes when you have a lot of minor pieces, well, which is basically almost here the case, I mean, not the rooks, but yeah. Then there can also be sometimes reasonable to castle still because king can be in danger and blah, 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 and everything is so relative and it's hard to generalize. But I was really surprised by this move. I came up with this knight d2 simply because I wanted to continue the development. Computer doesn't like it. The reason computer doesn't like it is because he prefers knight c3. Knight c3 I realized only after because I was like, I don't want to threat. I don't want to take. But the point is that knight cannot move. Let's say if black had this idea, very typical one, to go knight g6, and the reason they castled for that, if h5 and knight f4, we cannot for now, but yeah, okay, here there is h5, it doesn't work. But the point is, like, whenever knight wants to go, it cannot because the pawn needs to be protected. Whereas what I did knight d2 in the game, if you see after short castle knight d2, knight g6, now the knight is in time to come to f4. I did have my plan here. It was knight b3, bishop d6, something like h5, knight f4, bishop takes and bishop takes, rook d1. I was gonna play this position, but now that I came back home and analyzed the game before recording this recap, I was like, oh my lands. I'm so lucky he didn't go here. But I mean, it's complicated, right? Okay, black is better according to Stockfish, and what? Not a big deal. We just continue to play. My opponent, instead of playing knight g6, which was the move that I was expecting, went for f5. A pretty aggressive move, once again. It does make sense. You kind of want to open everything, the rook and the bishop on f2, and it seems like black is the one who is ahead in development. And you know the rule is when you're ahead of development, you need to open the position. Plus, my king could be actually in danger, even though I was just mocking about the fact that, whoa, endgame, there is no danger for the king. But sometimes it's not true. So here I come with this e5, and it's a beautiful pawn sack, a positional pawn sack. I mean, maybe dynamical actually, no, positional, and I was so proud of it. The best would have been to push f4 and not let me protect my protected passed pawn. Yeah, I love that saying. But my opponent fell into the trap. Remember I told you the title of the video? With the yacht to the endgame. Knight g6, knight b3, tempo attacking the bishop and preparing f4. Bishop e7, now f4, and yes, I do sacrifice the pawn on h4, but I have an amazing center, protected passed pawn. I have very strong file for the rook, and my bishop's gonna come, and I'm basically gonna dominate by the black squares, and the bishop, the light squared bishop of black cannot really develop. So yeah, it looks like super edgy for black. I mean, here with the yellow, I pointed all the weaknesses you can see.
And white holds a significant advantage despite being down a pawn. Very, very interesting strategic pawn sacrifice from Dina. Well done to her.
My friends, with all respect, have you clicked the button down below? It will improve your karma. I promise. Thank you. Bishop e3, and yeah, I'm chilling. I'm chilling on the dark squares. Rook d8, a weird move. Okay, here was a critical moment, a little bit for me, because my first initial thought was long castle, which is like the best, the most logical. If I want, I can double here. If I want, I can play in the center. But instead, I did this move that I really don't recommend you to do. I had this very weird idea. I mean, it's actually, okay, the idea is pretty reasonable. So I thought like, okay, first of all, why does my opponent play rook d8? Because he wants to transfer his knight g6, knight on the rim is dim, you remember that? Knight on the rim is slim, as Andrea Bodas would say. So knight g6, knight f8, knight e6 would have been a dream. Also, note that the knight is the strongest in front of the protected passed pawn, which is e6 here perfectly, because it stops, blocks, and controls all the squares above it, you know, like if I were to summarize you. Well, that's a lot of drawing. I hope Hikaru is proud of me right now. by watching this recap, obviously. Okay, Hikaru, don't watch, because here I do a mistake. Rook c1. So I was expecting knight g6, and then I would open the center and the c file with c4, and I would actually have an advantage here. But unfortunately, black doesn't have to go back. Instead, if black goes something super logical, like putting the rook on the open file, I cannot really go for c4 anymore. I mean, I still can, but the move is so not natural, and there are so many complications after d4 and stuff. The point is here that one should never put a rook in front of the pawn. And I actually lost the game right before this one in the morning in the same way. Do not put your rooks in front of the pawns. Put your rooks on the open files, or wherever you're sure of the pawn break. Here it wasn't that clear. So my opponent cracks. He goes for c5. And by saying that, computer gives it like the best move. And I'm like, oh, yeah, facepalm. I don't know why. It's just throwing your pawn away. Maybe it's because the danger was so hard that black really needed to give the pawn back. And if that's true, then congratulations, Sir Rampage Honest. Bishop takes c5, of course, not knight. If you take with a knight, then we lose the bishop after d4. So bishop takes c5, bishop takes c5, knight takes c5, and look at this monstrous knight. Look how it dominates simply everything here. Knight g6, back to the action. Although attacking the pawn, I have to defend the pawn. Yes, the one that was attacked. And here goes bishop a6. Another critical moment for me. Does black threaten take on d3 and take on f4? The answer is no, because my only dream was, let's say I do some random move, which I actually did in the game, king d2, which is like the best move, because I connected the rooks. Then just bishop d3, and I go c takes d3. And if knight f4, then rook c7. And the rook on the 7th rank is like an ultimate dream. And that's the reason why I had another option, by the way, here. I had an option b3, but after b3, I was so much surprised to see with the analysis that in this position, after knight takes f4 and rook takes c7, g6, it's only equal. And this is so weird to me because the rook is so beautiful. But the fact is, like, we do not gain anything yet, and our king is still not active, and it's not clear how to activate the other rook. But honestly, it's just computer, because, I mean, objectively, like, just play king d2 and you're still, like, so much better, like, practically for whites. Yeah. So obviously for me, in any sense, taking the knight on d3 for black was not making any sense, because literally my most stupid piece was the rook on c1, and it would open the rook. I decided to go, instead of b3, you know, kind of restraining the bishop and maybe somewhere playing c4, I decided to do something more logical, king d2, as I told you. I had another option, which was really nice, maybe the strongest, which was rook g5 attacking the pawn. And I came up with this very smart giga chat conclusion, which is very not helpful at all. The conclusion is that after, let's say, some random move, rook b8, rook takes f5 does not give any advantage to white, because after bishop c8 attacking the rook, rook g5 and rook f8, look at f4. It's such a weak pawn that is going to be gained back, and black is going to redeem all the activity. You see the bishop, how good it is compared to what it was before. Yeah, so that's the point. I realized that I wasn't really threatening from positional standpoint the pawn, and that's why I didn't attack it. But that's not a good idea. When you play chess, you need to be practical. It means even if you see that you have a threat and your opponent doesn't have to defend, you really need to put him into the situation of making that decision and understanding that there is no threat, okay? Exactly. So make him find it, because he might actually make a mistake. I did this king d2 and rook b8, very logical. Now bishop d3 takes and rook b2 is a threat, so b3, and here my opponent cracks. He literally throws the game. And he does that because he doesn't understand general principles of endgames. After bishop d3, double question mark, I'm not even considering bishop takes d3, even though it attacks the pawn. After knight f4, bishop f5, I'm going straight away, automatically, c takes d3, because you're correct, opening the rook, activating the most passive piece of mine. And after rook b4, this is what my opponent plans, you know, to take with the rook. Rook c7. And now, yeah, the question is, okay, what are you going to do with your knight? Did I ever tell you the lesson? Yes, the lesson is here. Never let your opponent to be on the 7th or 2nd rank. It's like the killer range for the rooks. And the second rule, very important, in the endgames, be aware of the importance of the king. The king is like the strongest piece. So here what helped me to win was also the fact that my king was strong, whereas the opponent king was in the, you know how it goes on the Belenkaya? Toilet. Exactly. Rook takes f4. Now I find this first line, but it's also like the most logical. Like, you see my rook here is not doing anything, and I really want to put 2 rooks. That would be such a dream on the 7. So bishop h5, rook f8, only like idea to kind of, you know, defend. It's not making any sense to take because I just go attacking the rook, activating the king. Rook takes a2. Okay, bravo, you took the pawns, but how are you gonna defend right now? Because once both rooks get on the 7th rank, it's just like game over. So, deep breath. Rook f8, I'm not afraid. e6, no rook f7. Now rook f2, because black has nothing to do. King e3, rook h2. Okay, bravo. I had to calculate another line. It wasn't that complicated. Bishop takes g6, f4 check, intermediate. Oh no, I'm so scared. King d4, of course, king d4, activating the king, and no king f3, no king f3. King is not a blockader. King is a fighter. King is a samurai. He goes up and takes all the pawns. H takes g6, rook takes g6, rook h7, only move to protect the pawn. And I mean, honestly, yes, there is a passed pawn. Okay, the king cannot stop it. And what? Look at rook at h7. Is that a rook? No, it's not. Look at the king. Look at my rooks. Here I had so much choice. I could like take the pawn, but the king would be really brave. I could just attack the pawn, rook, let's say rook b5, and f3 I have this a really nice e7. Rook has to go to e8 and now like getting the pawn back. Or the most, like what seemed to me the most like principle was to take the h7. Because, you know, another tip for you in the endgame, 2 connected passed pawns, especially in the rook endgames, 2 connected passed pawns are like game over. f3, and here I actually blundered. The last tactic in the game, I actually blundered. Thanks God I have this rook g1 in the worst case, and f2 and rook f1, and I don't let him promote, but I had to calculate the line from the beginning, and I saw that. Do you want to pause the video? If you want to pause the video and find the win for whites, then go ahead and do it. Okay, you're back, you're here with me, let's go. e7, f2, yes, they want to queen. And I was like, let me take my queen. The moment I took the queen, my opponent resigned. Literally here on my move, my opponent resigned.
Hadn't seen this f2 move. There she goes, collecting the queen, and the guy resigns. He resigns. He didn't want to see it on the board. He didn't want to let her do the checkmate after the promotion.
The reason he resigned is because e takes f8, queen, king takes, and now, oh no, he's gonna promote. Oh, there is a mate in one. Go ahead, put your queen. I want to see it. Show me. f1, queen. Haha, I'm an extra queen. Well, goodbye. Checkmate. Folks, if you made it that far, congratulations. Let me know what you think about the game, if you want to see more recaps or not, and as the god of chess would say, get out of here.